Welcome to the Suffolk Legal Innovation and Technology Lab's first Wednesday workshops for the document assembly line community. These workshops are a chance to dive deeper into topics related to building guided interviews with Docassemble using the document assembly line. Today's topic is building resilient Docassemble interviews with ALKiln, and our expert guest is Michelle, who created ALKiln. I'll ask her to introduce herself in a minute. First, we're recording this workshop and we will share it to our YouTube channel. To find it, just check our blog on SuffolkLitLab.org or search for Suffolk Lit Lab on YouTube. If you're participating live on Zoom, please use the chat to ask questions. I'll call attention to them if I need to as we go. Your video should be disabled, I guess. I'm not sure it is for everybody, but it can. And since it often helps to share your screen to demonstrate a problem, you can do that. Just please wait until you're invited. Before we dive in, if you're hearing about the Lit Lab or the document assembly line for the first time, head over to SuffolkLitLab.org to learn more. Everyone who uses Docassemble and the assembly line tools is welcome to attend our weekly community meetings, join our community forum on Microsoft Teams, and attend these workshops. If you'd like to join us, just email us at litlab@suffolk.edu. Okay, let's get started. Michelle, go ahead and introduce yourself, and you can take it away.
Hello, I'm Michelle. I'm a volunteer at Suffolk LIT Lab. I think we've covered some of this already, but I do civic tech volunteering as a software engineer. I've worked in JavaScript, Python, and then our Markdown, Mako, Jinja, Jumble that we have, as well as some C# and other baskets. I have built a testing framework for Docassemble, and we might dig into the reasons for that, but we did do a poll about what folks are interested in general. And the top answer for that at the moment is automated testing in general. So we'll start with that and see how far we get. I may share slides or I may not at this point. And I should ask more specific questions, but let's just first go over why you would automate tests at all. Why would you test, period, right? What is the point of testing? So not every interview needs a test, but especially where we work with vulnerable people and in vulnerable situations specifically. People are coming at these interviews, at these forums with a lot on their shoulders, right? They're coming with questions about what their life is going to look like, right? They don't know what they're supposed to do next, and they don't know what consequences that will have for them. So if an interview you have errors half an hour in, and they have no way to retrieve their data, and they have no other recourse. Often users just leave. It really breaks trust with them, and trust is hard, easy to break but hard to build something. There's a quote. So that is the purpose. That is why I am making the testing framework. A couple stories like that got through, and I decided I'd give something a shot. And we don't always need testing. If you have an interview that's up for a week, if you're asking about what's your, what dog breed are you, or something like that for your family, you probably don't need to test that interview. If you want something that is long-lived, if you want something that is, going to, that needs to be safe for people, for users, if you have dependencies, which we all have, which is Docassemble, then you need to test and test regularly, because if nothing else, even if our code is perfect, the code we depend on can change unexpectedly, and that may cause our code to break as well. So that is the purpose behind testing and If I had slides, I would say more specific things. It also documents the behavior that you have implemented. So you know, I expected it to behave this way because this is what my tests say. And another person coming to look at that 6 months later also understands that that is the way it was supposed to behave. Do folks want to just, thumbs up or in the chat? Do folks want to hear about general testing procedures, technical stuff, like how tests in the world, how people run them and how people manage the flow of tests? Or would you prefer to hear specifics about ALKiln, or I don't know. You know what? That's an or question. Who is interested in hearing about tests in the wild, not in Docassemble, how they create their flow, their what tools they use, etc. Here specifics, ALKiln. Okay. Okay. So we will talk a bit more about flexibility, which Jack asked about in the Slack in a bit. We will talk a little bit more specifically about ALKiln right now. So you can run ALKiln in a few different ways, and this is all in the documentation, which I will link at the end. I'm going to share my screen, and let me see where we want to start. So you probably all have seen the video, but I'm going to share it again for those who have not. Oh, this is not. I have to press play. Do I have to press play? I probably have to press play. Sorry, folks. I wish I had provocative questions I could ask. So that is loading. Okay. Let's try that.
It started loading, so it seems to be working.
Awesome. Let's see if I can press play and make this thing work. If not, we will move on. So this is ALKiln. It's not actually me. You don't usually see it this way. And this is a slow-mo version of what it does with your test. It is a
Michelle,
robot.
we're seeing your slide notes.
You're seeing my slide notes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. So let me pause the video because I don't know exactly what. Well, I mean, they're exciting too. They're not quite as relevant as they used to be, but if I press this, what do you see?
Now we see the video in your
Okay.
browser.
Thank goodness. Thank you, Zoom. All right. So this is a slow-mo version of ALKiln filling out a form for you. This is the Massachusetts 209A protective order. ALKiln is a robot. You give it instructions and it goes to your site and pretends to be a human and presses the buttons and gives the answers you asked for, downloads things, uploads things, etc. Let's pause that, and if I can control, move on to the next slide. Oh, yeah. So how do you write a test? We're going to go straight to I can control the thing. How do I get ALKiln? There are different modes in which you can run ALKiln. You can run it in your playground, so you can run it on your server rather. What you do is you go here to get the package that's listed there, ALKiln in the playground under Suffolk's GitHub account, and you install it on your server. You add a test to your source files folder. Can you all see edit source files? Yes, you should be able to see. Then you run the ALKiln in the playground interview, and you ask it to run a test. Once you've run that test, which takes at least 10 seconds because it happens in a background action, and be warned, if it's in a background action, it means you can't put a background action in your interview. My gosh, without notes, I'm nothing. But this is what some output will look like. This is past scenarios, so that means these scenarios passed, and in a moment I'll show you, and unfortunately we don't have good styling yet, but this is what a failed scenario looks like. You will have some images with errors in them, and in your report, which you will be able to link, you will be able to go to. Are you able to see my arrow? Probably not. Okay. That's great. So you will be able to go to the report, and it will say that the test has failing scenarios. We'll say scenario failed. So in this case, there was a missing docx template file. So that is how you run it in your playground. And you can also set it up in GitHub, and we can do that at some point if people are interested. And the setup in GitHub means that it would run when you commit to GitHub, and it would automate whenever you commit to GitHub on the GitHub page. You know what? It would run those tests and let you know if they were failing. You can use as many of these environments as you want. You can do it on your server and in GitHub. You can do it on your server and in GitHub and on an isolated testing server, which we can cover if we have time. And so it can become part of your workflow. You can test on your server while you're developing, edit, test, edit, test. And so you don't get the little red X's in GitHub. And so that you're sending, you're probably sending passing code to GitHub, because there are differences between the environments. When you, how do I put this? When you run the tests on your server, you're running it on an existing project, which means that project has all the files that it has in your playground. When you commit to GitHub, if you forget to save a file like a docx, that will not get into GitHub. And the tests in GitHub will fail. So it is not a one-to-one, and not all environments are the same. Let Sam know in chat if you want more details on that or have more questions. If not, I can move on to showing the tests themselves. I know it's, I wish I could ask more specific questions, but let's start on the first test. And if folks have questions about testing environments, we can go to it. So one of the questions is, when do you write tests? And the first test you can write right away. And you can write, does the interview load without errors? You don't have to use a specific text other than feature. The items in yellow are the the keywords and commands that you absolutely have to use. The text in purple, this is free-form text. It doesn't matter what it is. It's good to pick unique values because they will show up in tests. So for example, in each feature file, in each file that starts with that feature word, these are files that will go into your sources folder, sorry. You put a feature name and a scenario name. Scenario, I can start the tenant letter interview. And now the feature keyword and description. Let's see. There, and now we get the first step. So this is something that ALKiln has given you. Given I start the interview at open quote. That's the first thing you have to write. They sound like human sentences, which, you know, is nice, but they are actually specific syntax. They're like your code. They want specific syntax, and all these letters are required before you put in the file, the name of the file that you want that will start your interview. So that is in green. That is a value you put in there, and then you put a finishing quote. And that will test if your interview runs every time you push to GitHub. Other tests, you want to wait until you've developed a bit. And I'm going to start with kind of a straightforward test that just shows some of the parts of a test, of a step. So here I have a second step, and it says, and I set the variable quote, then it uses 0.name.first, and it's in bright blue, and that is the name of the variable you want to set. Then in yellow, close quote to open quote, Mary, that's in green. That's the value you want to set the variable to, and close quote. So that is how to set one variable and one value. And there are further steps. You know what? I should edit this now. I can't edit this now. I can show you further steps on how you continue to the next page and continue to the next page. But really, this is not the step that people use most often. The step that people use most often is the story table step, because this kind of step is a very inflexible step. And this will get into the flexibility very soon. Nope. That was one too many clicks. So we've got we start the interview at letter.yaml, and we say, I set the user name last to Smith and first to Mary, because the name, the order of the fields doesn't matter per page. But what does matter per page is, sorry, that's them not mattering. What does matter per page is not per page, but the order of the pages matters. So first you ask the first name and you tap to continue. And then you say one of your problems is plumbing. If you switch these, it doesn't work because your pages are not in that order. So in that way, it is not a flexible step. And you think, well, how can we, just ask questions in any, or answer questions in answer fields in any order? And that is with the story table step. So the story table step looks like this. It's a table of variable names and values. And here we are answering with the first name, last name, and plumbing problem again. But when we switch it, here, we put the plumbing problem first, it's not an issue. Because what a story table does is it sets a variable wherever it shows up, anywhere in your interview. If it shows up, it will set it to that value. You can have as many story tables as you want. They will try to automatically continue to the next page, and if they cannot continue, they will let you know. Sam, you'll tell me if there's anything I need to
I
ask
will.
anybody.
I'm keeping an eye out for chat, and I will definitely follow up. Emily has a
Okay.
raised hand, actually. Just noticed. I'm sorry if it's you've had it up for a minute, Emily. Go ahead and ask.
Thanks. No, I was just wondering, when you say it'll try to continue, so let's say there's a bunch more fields. You've only put in these 3, the information that needs to go in 3 of the fields, but there's like a bunch more fields and screens and stuff. So does it then stop because it doesn't know what to put in a field, or what does it do when it gets to a field that you haven't told it what to fill in?
So as long as the field is not required, it's fine. It doesn't interact with fields that you don't tell it to. So if hitting continue without filling in the field will work, then it doesn't matter. It'll just try and hit continue. As soon as it's matched all the fields that it can on the page and filled in all the answers that it can, it'll try to hit continue. Then if it can't continue, then you have a problem. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But good question, yes. And it continues and continues and continues until it gets to the page, the page download screen that has the ID download screen, which I forgot to point out. It's the first sentence. It has the command, and I get to the question ID, open quote, download screen, close quote, with this data. Otherwise, it doesn't know where to stop. And I wish I had written out that command a bit more clearly, but these are the parts in yellow that are required. The parts in blue are the variable name. And we can see that problems is a checkbox. We don't have problems on the left and plumbing on the right. We have problems plumbing is true, because this is what a checkbox looks like in Docassemble as data. That
So
was
are you basically just
completely
saying
nonsensical.
you're essentially giving it a whole bunch of variables and values and saying, use these wherever you need to use them to get to that.
Exactly.
And I get to the question ID screen.
Exactly.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense.
And if it gets stuck and is unable to continue and is on the wrong screen, it will give it by default 30 seconds. And after 30 seconds, it will say that it was unable to continue. Why does it wait that long? Because it's super annoying. No, that's not why. It's because it can't tell if your server is slow and just unable to load the next page yet, and it should wait, or whether it should stop right then. So unfortunately, there isn't a way to tell the difference. There might be in the future, but we will see what we can see. So now flexible steps. When Jack posted in Slack, I believe you said that you were looking for something flexible so you could put kind of all your values in there and it would just test all your value combinations or test value combinations. I don't know if you meant all your value combinations, but I thought I would address that. So testing flexibly in general is an interesting puzzle. And we'll do a little math. I don't know, maybe lawyers all know math already. I'm certainly not. It's not one of my strong suits, but it is not really feasible in a lot of cases to test completely flexibly. So when you start, say it asks, what's your favorite fruit? We're all familiar with that question. You've got 2 options, apple and pear. Great. So you can run 2 tests. Either you pick apple or you pick pear. That's 2 tests. Your next question also has 2 options, broccoli or onion. Okay, so now this is 4 tests because you can choose apple and broccoli, apple and onion, pear and broccoli, pear and onion. So this continues. The next time you add 2 questions, you have 8 tests to run. And say you add 2 more questions, each with two options, that's then 32 tests to run. And this is when this is when these are radio button questions. When you get to checkboxes, say you have 2 options, it's actually 4 options. You can choose hot, cold, both, or neither. Imagine it was broccoli, onion, both, or neither. And so you end up with 64 questions. And that is, I think, 5 screens in total. So this gets out of hand pretty quickly, and it's called an NP complete problem. And if anyone wants to chat more about that, I would be super excited. The proposal Quentin has, which is something we are working on, is random constrained input testing. So sorry, we said that was constrained testing, but this is random constrained input testing because it picks, you say, you know, run this test 3 times with random answers, given the constraints. You can pick either apple or pear. You can pick broccoli or onion. And so it runs the path 3 times. That's it, not exhaustively. And each time you run the tests, it picks 3 different paths. So you hope that eventually it will pick a good number of those paths, and you'll catch the cases you're looking for. And we hope that when we implement this feature, it will be able to tell you how you can recreate the error, because otherwise it's not really worth having a random test. In general, I suggest, at least if you can, testing cases that are especially sensitive. So for example, when people want to impound their address, that is a sensitive path, and you want to make sure it ends up, it ends correctly with their address impounded. You want to test border cases, which we all should talk sometime about, how to tell people dates and times when things are due, when everybody is in different time zones, because there are edge cases there that are definitely important to control for. You want to test things that have failed in the past. Those are always great candidates. And you want to test the common paths. So if you're thinking of, you know, what kinds of things should I test? Those are some categories of tests. So those are some specifics. We can go over some other ALKiln steps. I don't know how long we've been going. I don't want to use up all our time with no chance for questions.
You've got plenty of time, but yeah, if folks have questions, go ahead and raise your hand or throw them in the chat, either way.
Hang on, I see something in chat. Yes, and you can, I will tell you about the story generator in 1 second. I do want to cover that because that can really help you set up at least your first few tests or more of them, and then you can go through and change individual variables and add things and take things away to help. I'll go over a bit more story table just a sec. I'm going to read. Seems like the ALKiln story tables are good because they're not picky about the order of your variables. Plus, you can copy and paste your first story table and create other important variations. Yes, exactly. They also don't care if you have extra rows. And that was a comment Quentin made in Slack as well. No, Michael made this comment in Slack. If you have, which can make it a little bit easier, though sometimes a little bit messier, to copy paste tests and keep making different copies of tests, because you don't have to be so careful about what you leave in or take out. You will get a warning if you have 2 rows that have the same variable, and different values. But that should be the extent of it. It really tries to be forgiving. And it will at the end tell you about your unused rows. So I'm going to come back to that in a sec, because first I'm going to show you, before I hop out of this interface, I'm going to show you the ALKiln story table generator. So you can generate a test with at this site, ALKiln story. What you can do is you can go to your interview. Oh, by the way, don't trust QR codes. You don't know where they lead. You think you know where they lead, but you don't know where they lead. You just know where someone told you they lead. Anyway, so the steps for that, there should be a picture, and there isn't. So I will stop sharing my screen, and I will stop sharing the that screen, and I will escape, and we will share my whole screen, not whole screen, sorry, my browser. Are you seeing my browser? Because that would be really useful.
Yes, we are.
Ah, that's awesome. I love it. Okay. So what you can do with an interview, if you want to give it a story table quickly, is you can run your interview, run it to whatever page you want to get to. So I gave my name, or the child's name, I don't remember. I gave some other information. I said what court I wanted them to submit at. And I got to this page, and this is as far as I've gotten in my interview, but I'm pretty sure this is going to be solid. So I'm going to turn this into a test. And what I can do is I can open up with the source button, and I know there's a way to do this. There's a way to do this in assembly line, but I'm showing the general way to do this in case you don't have assembly line. So you can show variables and values. Okay. And this actually has a lot more data in here. I can save the file. I'm going to pause for a sec, the screen share, while I do that. Maybe my connection is not good. Let me check. I'm going to turn off my video for a bit, just to let this behave a bit better. I'm going to call this file. Oh, good. Petition, just my computer is very slow. I'm going to call this petition variables. I've saved it. Resume. So I use this button up here to save it. This is in Firefox. You can also copy paste it, and you can save it to a file, or you can just copy paste it as text. You go to the ALKiln story table page, and either you paste your text in here or you upload it. Upload that file here. Then you give the name of the YAML file that you want to load right here. You give it the final ID of the question, which I thought was prior name change, but I was actually wrong. So let me just get you all out of my way. That was actually prior name change, yes, no. You copy that, you put it in the story table, you give the file a name, and I'm saying it's missing info because I said I didn't have a docket number. So all the tests in this file is special because the user says, I am missing some information. And this test is special because the user says, I don't know my docket number. And it will generate this test below, which has a lot more rows than it seems like it would need, which is definitely true. because some of the variables that Docassemble has in there are unnecessary. And there are things I'll have to change about this. For example, I'll have to take out these new lines. This is like the Weaver. It gets you a draft. You can copy the text in the code, or you can download the generated file. And then you can go to your project's source folder and either browse and upload the file, or just make a file and paste the values in here. Do I need to pause or, well, it's a video, so maybe you can come back and hopefully I'm not leaving anything out. There are little gotchas, and we can talk more about them if necessary, or not if necessary, if you folks want. There's just one main one with pages that do loops with there is another.
Jack mentioned that the documentation was still showing 3-column story tables, and you were showing us 2 columns a moment ago, but the generated story table there looks like it's using
the generator
column
uses
too.
3 columns because it doesn't know what version of ALKiln
Gotcha.
you're using.
And both work with the current version?
Yep, both work.
Okay.
Just
Gotcha.
don't put anything in the trigger column, and don't worry about why it's called trigger, and just ignore it in general. Just
Okay.
don't think about the 3rd column if you're using the latest version of Docassemble. No, of ALKiln, you don't have to worry about it. Like I said, we try and make it flexible. Then if you installed, then you run it in whatever way you want, either by committing the code to GitHub, or as I did here, by running it with our, where is this? I don't know where this is, but I ran it somehow. I don't see ALKiln in here right now, but it usually is. But it's in our list of interviews. And I can show you what that looks like, but there's also documentation about it. And this is what the end looked like. I got a successful test. Don't pay attention to this rainbow. It's misleading. We're going to remove that. That's a successful setup. So the test set things up and ran the tests. And here I can see the report for my test, which I can see here. We've got the screens it went to, the values it set, and we can see the rows that got set by themselves. So we had that giant list, that giant table. I could just copy this right here and make a table with this, because these are the unused rows. And you do want to take a look at these unused rows and make sure that none of them should have been used. Because if some of them should have been used, but the page never showed up, that's something you definitely want to know. Okay.
Chris wants to know if typically you want to make the last page or the download page the ID of the final question, right?
It just depends on what you're testing, honestly. For example, you could make a kickout screen the last page of your test. That might be it doesn't have to be the final downloads page. Where you have files to download, you could download them. So if you don't get to the downloads page, so if you want to download them, you should probably get to the downloads page. But supposing you have part of an interview, there are sometimes what we call, if y'all recall, umbrella interviews. So there are interviews that you include in your umbrella interview. So those you could take out and test independently, right? Because you could make an interview that just runs, that includes just that file and just runs the questions in that file. And so you could also make partial tests. So it doesn't always have to end with a download screen, but that is typically, you're right, that is typically typically the end of the last ID in the test. So that is a little bit about testing. Was there anything else on the screen I wanted to review? At some point I'll do a presentation where it takes screenshots. There's also sometimes more information. If there was an error, there is information in the report, and there's also sometimes information at the very end and we see we got a rainbow because the test succeeded. One scenario, we had one scenario and it passed. We had 2 steps and they both passed. So, what was one of my points? The unused rows, was to see the unused rows. I think there was something else in the Slack that Quentin said that I wanted to address, but I don't remember what it is. So if you remember, Quentin, let me know. There is another question I want to address from Teams, which was Chris's question, which I'm trying to pull up now, but maybe I have to turn my video off again. Okay.
She said, once you set up ALKiln for an interview, what kinds of things would prompt us to have to change the ALKiln setup for that interview?
Great question. I love it. I love that question. So it is mostly the main thing that would change right now is if ALKiln got a new major version. So right now we're on version 5. And if ALKiln got a new major version, version 6, we'd ask you to update with the setup interview, which I haven't gone into, but this is the GitHub setup interview that will create this file and put it in your repository and make a PR, a pull request, asking you to accept this new code into your repository. It won't do anything automatically. It will only request. So that is really the only time that you have to run the setup interview again. And if there are customizations you've made to this file, you probably will want to either undo some of those changes that it makes, or just simply, edit this to add the 6 onto the end instead of the 5. Yeah, I think unless something drastic happens in the future, that should be the only
I suspect Chris
change
might have
that
been
would
asking about
probably
what changes to the interview itself, like maybe a new required question you'd have to go and update your test.
change the ALKiln setup. Oh, yes, my apologies. So for example,
Well, I don't know if that's what she means. I might be putting words in her mouth. I'm curious.
Okay, well, you let us know, Chris, but it's a good question anyway. So that depends on what steps you've written. If you have written anything in your test that is no longer valid, well, first of all, if you've written the steps that are not flexible, I set the variable, chair to the value armchair. In those cases, if you take out the question or if you change the value to green armchair, then you will have to update the test. And if you switch the order of the pages, then you will have to update that kind of test that says I set the variable, or I set chair to armchair. With the story table, as long as the variable names and values stay the same, you should not have to update anything. If you are downloading a file and you change that file name, you have to update with the new file name. If you change the ID of the screen that a story table is going to, you have to update. Same with the file name. So all these specific values, those are things you would have to update. We have a step that checks for phrases on the screen. For example, sometimes people want to check that. In Caroline's case, there is a step shown on the final screen that says, call the court or something. Then, she checks for the phrase, call the court. And the test tells her whether that phrase is on that page. And if she changes that phrase on the page, she needs to change that phrase in the test. And there are ways to use your editor to multi-select values so that you can do that more easily. Let me just turn off my video for a second because I'm having loading issues. And I can show you one of those really quickly, I think. Source. So, for example, if I do this and on Mac, you can see it's highlighting the others in green, but they're not properly highlighted. If I press Command D, and I believe D as in dog, I believe this is true for Control D as in dog on Windows, though Windows folks feel free to correct me. Then I can come here and I can edit these all at once. So, and they don't have to be on subsequent lines. On consecutive lines, they can be kind of anywhere in, you know, if I look up coordinators, are they anywhere? See, they're in various places. So I can do that, navigate to the end and change that value. So that is one way that your editor can help you update to new values. Okay.
I mentioned earlier that
Some
copying
things.
and pasting tables is another way or copying and pasting tests is another way to make a lot of variations quickly. Maybe
Yes,
say more about
yes.
that.
So suppose, where did our report go? Did I keep that open?
For what it's worth, Emily says that that feature of multiple selecting works well on Windows too.
Great, that's great. So supposing I have this table, I have this step, and I'm going to now edit my file to this demonstration. I can then copy this test, this scenario, and I want to give it a new name because as we can see in the report, this says scenario, I don't know my docket number. And it will show you the scenario description here up to like 120 characters or something like that. There's some kind of limit, but you've got a fair amount of room. So you want to make sure to make that name unique. I don't know my name. And I can change the values in here to, it says petitioner name change, blah, 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 blah. I just city first, last name, and A, and A, and A. So I can do a version that's just the same, except I want to make sure actually that I do know my docket number. So this is false, and I don't remember what the variable name is, but I'm going to say that docket number is 1, 2, 3, 4. So that way I have a new test just with, you know, a copy paste. All right. I know that was a kind of a lot to throw at you, and believe me, there's a lot more. The documentation is available on the documentation.
assemblyline.suffolklitLab.org.
Yep. Here is the story table documentation, but if you just take off, you know, story table, or if you just take off the end of this completely and just do intro, which is not happy with me about, but there you go. You can't always have your way. You will see more information about ALKiln, about setting up your tests, about writing tests, all kinds of stuff. We're always working to make that documentation more clear It is editable by you. If you have a Docassemble account, if you have a GitHub account, you too can edit the documentation and update it with clarifications or changes in wording or additional information. Right, and don't trust QR codes. Very important.
Thank
So,
you so much, Michelle. Anything,
yeah.
any closing thoughts?
come talk to us. A good debugging tool. Come talk to your community, I think
Definitely.
is a good takeaway at any time.
For sure.
All right.
Thanks very much. And if you have ideas for future workshops, please let us know. You can email me. You can email the Lit Lab at suffolk.edu or let us know in Teams. Bye, y'all. Have a great week.